Well, there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Tuesday evening to everyone out there that is joining us tonight. We are back presenting you another fantastic episode of Fantasy right here on RotoBaller.com. As always, presented to you by the good fellas at RotoBaller.com. Go to RotoBaller.com today. Sign up for your premium pass. Use promo code WOO at checkout for a special discount. Go grab that premium package today at RotoBaller.com. Also brought to you by, of course, Underdog Fantasy. Promo code WOO there as well. Get you a little bit of extra cash on first deposit over there at Underdog Fantasy as well. So check that out. Here we are, and joined by typical co-host, the OG of Woo Fantasy, Mr. Nick Hefley, the real FF GOAT. How are we doing tonight, sir?
And we're back.
That's right, and we're back.
Wow, I haven't seen him at a beat. You rocking the lower half of the goatee there? Not the upper or the rest of the beard there, I see.
Now I'm rocking it. You know, we're hitting those 100-degree days over the last few weeks, and you know, I'm with a little bit of losing the weight. I feel better about cutting the beard off. I look better with it, so we're going with it. It's hot outside. This is a little cooler.
Okay.
What's going on? What's going on in the Hefley household down there?
Kids, I'm flying solo here the last couple of days. The wife's in the Dominican, so I've got the kids. But I am, dude, I'm just excited about Nashville this weekend, man. Live drafting, Scott Fishbowl Nashville this weekend. A little sad I'm not hosting. I'm not gonna lie, in Atlanta this year, but it'll be nice to be on the opposite side of it, just getting to enjoy it and getting to pod with you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was going to come to next. It's Scott Fishbowl officially. Scott Fishbowl 14 finally kicked off for the slow drafters officially yesterday. You know, we're in a not typical position that we've been in the last few years. Normally, you know, over the last 2 years, we've hosted down there in Atlanta. So we've been the first weekend of the live draft. So obviously there's been the first couple of weekends of live drafts. Now everybody's officially started as of yesterday, except for us and a few other live draft locations, which that's what we'll be doing this upcoming Saturday. So we will be live in Nashville, also streaming live and covering the two divisions that we're all in, SSB 14 Nashville. I'm in the Goose division. I believe you are in the Marcellus Wallace division. So we'll be doing that, covering the draft live, discussing tidbits of it, picks, things like that. So that's one thing out of the way this week. We got Scott Fishbowl this weekend. As for me, the next weekend after, or the next week after, on the 23rd, I believe, on a Tuesday night, I'll be participating in the Pros versus Joes on FFPC. My first year catching the invite to this league. I'll be drafting in that league with some nice competition, some good friends of mine, Brian Drake, that you know from Fantasy Points. That's in every morning on Sirius XM Fantasy, that channel. He hosts that Fantasy Points radio show there. Dwayne McFarland's also in this draft room with me too. There's some heavy hitters. Bob Harris is in this one with me, so looking forward to that. That's the best ball draft. I'll be doing the week following that, and then the next week after that, I believe, is when we have Raz Bowl 6 kicking off. So here we go.
You're back in together, so
right. We're finally going back in on that, and I'm looking forward to that. It's busy next few weeks, getting ready for draft season finally here upon us. A couple weeks away, we've got the NFL, training camps finally getting going across the league. So looking forward to that. But so what are you looking forward to most over the next few weeks? What's your one big thing as we get into, the heat of summer?
Yeah, I mean, non-league wise, just really getting into camps, starting to see some of these guys, especially these rookies. as a Bears fan, I'm looking forward to Caleb Williams actually getting rolling there. And I mean, I always look forward to Hard Knocks every year, but probably especially this year, just to see kind of some of the behind the scenes action going on with the Bears. But expecting big things for the Bears this year with Caleb Williams leading up.
Absolutely. And we, of course, what started last week, we were talking about a little bit offline, a few days ago. We've got the off-season Hard Knocks with the New York Giants. That was all the talk of Twitter, I believe, last Wednesday and Thursday, with some of the clips that kind of broke out from there. The GM talking about what they were going to do with Saquon Barkley, the contract with Daniel Jones, and how they're kind of handicapped with that. So this, for me, would be a fantastic offseason if we were going to do a Hard Knocks. This would be the perfect offseason Hard Knocks to cover the Dallas Cowboys. Would you or would you not agree with that, with all the contract situations and things like that going on down in Dallas?
It didn't seem that interesting.
Oh, come on.
Nothing's actually happened though.
Not much has happened.
We got Zeke back. There you go.
Got Zeke back. We got to talk about Dak Prescott walking around in a walking boot during the 4th of July weekend. That caught all the ire of people on fantasy Twitter over the weekend. So that's one other thing. But it's obviously, the talk of Cowboys Twitter has been contract situation with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. So I think that would have been an interesting situation to monitor over the course of the next couple of months, personally.
Yeah.
But
only to the Cowboys fans.
Yeah, only to the Cowboys fans. But rather, I digress. It's interesting to see the inner workings back behind a team like the New York Giants. Really anyways, I like to see a lot of that stuff, the talk behind it, because like I mentioned to you, I think a lot of that stuff really kind of hones in on what we do from a fantasy perspective. We run our pseudo fake franchises that we have. We are general managers of our own rosters, so it's kind of interesting to see, the nuts and bolts and all the mathematics that go into this, and the roster decisions that are having to be made behind the scenes. Even going back into that episode last week with the Giants, going back to at the Senior Bowl, you have the Giants GM talking with the Panthers GM where they're best friends. You find that out, and that's how the Brian Burns trade really kind of came to fruition, is because little chit chat on the sidelines as they're watching prospects perform down there.
Yeah. Which is just how you and I talk trades, just BSing around, like throwing out ideas. Like it kind of hits home a little bit. Is like, it's how they do in the NFL too. Like, it's not all formal. Let me send a fax over with my proposal and you get back with me kind of a thing, which I'm sure that happens all the time. Those two guys are friends. I'm sure it happens a little bit more formal in a lot more discussions, but no, just really cool to see that's how deals get done sometimes.
Right. No, I absolutely. But now kind of getting into where deals cannot happen is getting into the Scott Fish Bowl. We talked about that. But then also too, I wanted to kind of get into, a league that we talk about quite often on this podcast, if you've followed over the years, and that's the SBFFC, the big event that we do, the high stakes event that's located in Bowling Green, Kentucky each year. This year taking place on August 16th and 17th that weekend. Still looking for people to join the league. We've got this year we got Joey Wright, Joe Bryant, two big names from Football Guys. If you follow their work and you follow Joey Wright on Twitter, those two will be live and in attendance at the main event. But want to kind of kick it over to, for now, we're going to show you a promo video, get some interest into the SBFFC. So check this out.
The Southern Bluegrass Fantasy Football Championship, proudly presented by Pseudo Financial Services, Clark Distributing, and Overtime Sports Bar and Grill, is an annual Kentucky tradition and an experience unlike any other. It's a Las Vegas-style event right here in South Central Kentucky. It all goes down on Saturday, August 17th at the Carol Nicely Conference Center in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and is hosted by the award-winning WKU Topper Red Dance Team. A $250 buy-in can win you the $10,000 grand prize. You can also score more than $11,000 in total cash, prizes, and trophies. This season-long fantasy football tournament features 22 12-team leagues with a maximum total of 264 teams competing. Face off against the best fantasy football players in the world. Sign up today at sbffc.com.
That is right, the SBFFC. That is the high-stakes event that we talk about on this podcast quite often. So if you got any interest in it, go check it out, sbffc.com, and sign up to get your team today.
Yeah, shoot us a note. I mean, we're happy to chat with you, too. I mean, I think I've been doing this now almost 10 years.
I think you're 10 years in. I'm 9 years in, I believe.
Yeah, you started up the year after I did. So, I mean, if you're looking for something live, if you live in the South, if you live anywhere close or want to just come to Nashville, there's guys that come from Canada, really all over the United States that come to this thing that is looking to compete against the best of the best. Online's great, but when you really get into that drafting live, it is a different thing. And to me, the cream usually will rise to the top. So to me, it's just putting your fantasy football knowledge to the test live and in person. What better way to do things?
Absolutely. And kicking back over to live draft talk, Gore, of course, that's what we're going to be doing with the SFB 14.
There's a lot of SFBs.
There's a lot of SBs and FBFs and everything. So, so kicking back over to Scott Fish Bowl, because that's a lot of the talk that's you've come find online over the course of the last couple of days. Everyone's excited talking about the rosters. You've kind of got a chance as we're getting into closer to our draft time on Saturday. The scoring format, and if people out there don't know the scoring format, I'll kind of run it down real quick for you for the Scott Fish Bowl this year. It's 6 points per passing touchdown, 2 points pass for 2-point conversion, of course, 1 point per 50 yards passing, which kind of brings the quarterbacks a little bit back into the discussion with the other positions this year. It's a little bit different than years past. Rushing and receiving, of course, is kind of your standard 1 point for 10 yards. You're getting an extra 0.5 per first down, 0.25 per rush attempt, which gives you that added boost for the running backs. Receptions wise, you're getting 1 point PPR. Tight ends get the 1.5 PPR tight end premium here with this. And they also get the extra point for first down as well. So another boost so it's tight end premium, if we want to look at it that way.
Premium plus.
Premium
plus.
So, but the real kicker that a lot of people have been in discussions about, and what's really garnered a lot of back and forth debate over the last few weeks with the live drafts kicking off, has been the kick special teams. Yeah. But kicking 3.3 is basically you get a point for every yard on the field goals. That adds a little bit of extra juice to the kickers, but no, it's special teams. Punt and kick returns. You're getting a point for every 5 yards per return. Throws a lot of weird little caveats into the situations now with guys like a Rashid Shaheed, Xavier Gibson, guys like that we see that have that extra added bonus to where they're used somewhat a little bit on offense. Rashid Shaheed especially gives a little bit. There's some packages that the Jets do slide him in and out of, but now you have that return yardage that's boosting their potential profile. We've talked about it previously as well as, a guy like Shaheed ranked inside the top 20, I believe, or top 25 in SFB scoring with this new scoring format last year. So now you have guys that are going to be reaching for return specialists. How do you feel about that going into the early rounds of Scott Fish Bowl?
I mean, it just adds an extra wrinkle to things. I mean, I don't think I will personally go that route in the early rounds of the Fish Bowl. Sorry, I am coming off a cold, and I even start to chuckle a little bit, and I get coughed up a little bit. What's not going to get coughed up is the ball coming out of Rashid Shaheed's hands, because I feel like he's going to take a little bit more of a role in the offense this year. So I think if people are going to take a chance on one of these guys simply based on their return ability, I think it also has a little bit as well, because the return yards are great, but it's definitely not a given every time. So, you go out and get a guy who's just a return specialist, like your old Josh Cribbs kind of a guy, or Devin Hester, unless they're returning a touchdown or getting some major yards, you're not really getting a lot. So a guy like Rashid Shaheed is going to, I think, be involved a little bit more in the pass game this year. Do I think he would be the top target out of those guys? You're really going to target anybody? The rest,
yeah.
Down there.
Yeah. So
I feel like you're thinking a little bit different on this, though.
Yeah, it really kind of comes down to, draft flow. We talk about it year in and year out, how the draft flow goes, how your roster build looks, things like that. I mean, if you get to a spot where you're 5 receivers deep on your roster, just depending on how you're building this team out, if you want to take a flyer on a guy like Shaheed, in that 10th, 11th round, I'm not going to blame you. I have seen like screen caps over the course of the last week. I believe there was a draft the other day where Shaheed was taken in the 4th round. That's a little excessive. I can't co-sign for that. That's not anything that I would be interested in doing.
Looks like I see an updated one. He got taken at the end of round 1.
Good Lord Almighty. How do you feel about that?
I'm, as I usually say, I'm not touching that with yours.
No, not at all. We're not touching that with anybody's. Good Lord. I get it. It's, a lot of the talk is with Scott Fishbowl, it's charity, it's for Fantasy Cares. So if you've not donated to Fantasy Cares and you want to do so, obviously go check them out on Twitter as well, Fantasy Cares. Pop in a donation. Obviously we would enjoy having, as much donation money coming in as possible. But, everybody talks about how, this is for fun. We're looking to have fun with this. It's, not to really be taken too seriously. Myself and Nick, we're on the fence with that. Obviously, I take it seriously myself too, as well. You're drafting to win. Obviously, some people, want to have fun with it and draft for fun, things like that. But I'm having fun. We're going to have fun at the event on Saturday. Talking to everyone, kind of mingling, networking with everyone. So we're looking forward to that. But obviously you want to win. At the end of the day, you want the bragging rights that, I was a finalist in the Scott Fishbowl. You want to be involved in that. So
I think the fun comes in just meeting everybody and getting to know other people, expanding your reach and your network. I would hope people aren't doing the draft just to do the draft and making BS picks out there, because that doesn't make it fun for anybody. No matter what you're doing. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be where the fun is. I'm excited to go to Nashville. I hate we were going to do it at Roto Grinders in Nashville. We got moved to a bar, so that won't be as fun. But it's going to be a great time. So
sure. Yeah. And like I said, we're going to be live streaming the event, discussing the picks. I'm picking from the 2 spot in my division. You're picking from the 9 spot. Any indications or anything based on what you've seen ADP wise? I mean, we can kind of look at it too, how the first round is unfolding in some of these drafts at this point. Do you have kind of a way that you might be leaning with that first pick at the 9 spot for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely taken a look at a lot of mocks and a lot of ADP coming out of the first drafts that have been doing, and I don't know where I'm going, but I would know one position that I'm probably not going to go with, and that's wide receiver. I've never gone wide receiver early in Scott Fishbowl. Yep. You can usually find that value a little bit later, so I am usually waiting a little bit longer to be able to find that value. So it usually is the best player available. I had the 9 pick, I believe 9 or 10 last year, and got CMC last year. Had Kyron Williams. I missed out on the playoffs by, points. We're talking 2 or 3 points I missed out on, and having Kyron Williams miss a little bit of time there, that hurt. I had some quarterback situations that went wrong, but last year is all about CMC and just taking the best player available. And I think if you go back and look over. If you go back and look over Scott Fishbowl drafts, finishes, running backs are typically finishing a little bit higher to me, unless you can get a running quarterback like we were just talking here for this year. So,
yeah. So for me at 2, and obviously with the 3rd round reversal factored in, I'm more than likely going to be going with quarterback there. So pretty much it's going to wind up being best quarterback available at that spot. I am currently feeling like it's going to be Josh Allen going number 1. That feels like the consensus. He is the consensus top pick in ADP right now. Coming off the board, ADP wise 1.9, followed by Christian McCaffrey 2.6. And then we have Jalen Hurts at 3.2. So those are your first 3 picks in consensus ADP for the Scott Fish Bowl right now. Obviously, too, I throw this out there to everybody watching the stream right now. So if you have a question or want to ask about a roster build for Scott Fish Bowl, shoot us a comment, throw a question in there, go to the YouTube. Obviously, shoot us a like there, subscribe, comment, everything. We would greatly appreciate that. But
let us know where you're at in your draft right now. If you're on the clock trying to make a pick, we'll do our best. Not being able to be live in there and with you, but we'll see if we can help navigate the waters there as well. So.
Exactly, we can be your sniper in the weeds for your live pick on Scott Fish Bowl if you're there currently. So obviously, shoot that into the comments. Let us know there. But outside of that, kind of just wanted to touch on the Scott Fish Bowl a little bit, get everybody acquainted with it. I know there's some excitement with that draft right now, but really, for the most part, what I wanted to get into with this show this week is I wanted to get into and talk about the running back landscape. Talk about our rankings, talk about the tiers, draft strategy, what you might be looking at with the running backs. Here we are, like I said, 2 weeks before training camp. We're in that dry spell of the news cycle for the NFL right now. You're not getting a lot of stuff coming out right now. So most of what you see from an ADP standpoint, and I really won't kind of touch in on the ADP per se with the running backs tonight, because obviously a lot of that's underdog ADP that's out there right now. Some FFPC drafts with the Fantasy Pros Championship and some of those drafts that are out there. So you get a little bit of an indication of where some of these guys are going that way, but a lot of it is flooded with underdog ADP, which gives you kind of really less of a real indication than a real draft, because I've talked about it ad nauseum, especially on Twitter, is with the underdog drafts, you're seeing a lot of wide receivers just coming off the board left and right, guys going 4, 5, 6 deep at wide receiver, and it's just pushing all that value at running back down on the board. So it's not really representative of what you'll see in, say, drafts that we do with the SBFFC, drafts that we do any of our leagues that we run, home league drafts, any of your leagues, and everybody watching out there right now, your home league drafts, you're not going to see ADP similar in another month from now the where you're seeing it right now. So I didn't really want to touch on ADP too much. We'll talk about more running backs, tiers, draft strategy, and things like that. So getting into that, obviously, you talked about Christian McCaffrey just a second ago. Consensus number 1 right now. You don't waver on that at all. He's number 1 off the board. Is he your 1-1 in drafts right now?
I think I would say so. Yeah. He's definitely my 1-1. I think his only real question mark, he's never had a bad season when he hasn't been hurt. If he's been healthy, he's been performing. So, his only question is injuries. And if he's not injured, he's going to be toward the top. So there's, again, he's had some seasons where that's happened, but by and large, he's been up there. So yeah, I would say and confidently say he is my 1-1.
Yeah, for basically a full slate. He played 16 games last year, and he was number 2 rushing yards per game as far as being able to meet that threshold, only behind Kyron Williams. But Christian McCaffrey in the 16 games played, rushing yards per game was 91.2. Like I said, obviously Kyron Williams was above him and that mark at 95.3. But really, if you get down into more of kind of the weeds, a lot of these guys that played a similar slate, you've got James Conner at 80.0 rushing yards per game. And then a lot of the other guys, your Derrick Henry's at 68, kind of more in that range as far as rushing yards per game. So, yeah, obviously you're getting that big bump with Christian McCaffrey as far as usage, production. It's all there. So he's kind of that set it and forget it pick. For me, I've got 1-1. I've got CD Lamb as my 1-1 in drafts. And that's feeling like it's tipping towards being the consensus in a lot of drafts that I'm hearing. A lot of experts and a lot of analysts that are out there going that route there. McCaffrey at 2, depending on roster build and how you want to shake things out. But for the first round, it's pretty much you've got 3 running backs coming off the board in most of these drafts. It's McCaffrey, Bijan, Robinson, and then also Breece Hall. With Bijan and Breece Hall, do you have Bijan ahead of Breece Hall? How do you view those next 2?
I personally have Bijan ahead of Breece Hall.
Yep.
I don't think that we're very far off from those 2 being there, but I think with the offense that's going to be in place in Atlanta, situation that we're looking at, I think that offense is going to be much better. I think they're going to rely on Bijan quite a bit more. I think he's going to find the end zone a little bit more. So again, you could flip flop those guys, and I wouldn't have any kind of qualms about that.
Yeah, essentially apples to oranges really is when you get down to kind of comparing those 2. The only thing that I worry about with Breece from a production standpoint is you saw a lot of his points come via pass receptions down the stretch last year because the offense was really bad. There was a lot of dump offs because of poor quarterback play. So I think factoring that in coming into 2024, a healthy Aaron Rodgers there, do you have any worry that the reception totals and targets are going to come back from where we saw that heavy usage down the stretch last year for Breece?
No. Aaron Rodgers has proven over the years, I think especially as he's getting older, he's probably going to dump the ball off a little bit more. Aaron Jones made a career out of Aaron Rodgers' dump off passes in PPR leagues. So I think even more so with something like this, with him getting older, coming off an injury, maybe not as likely to be able to chuck the ball deep, even though, let's face it, he's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to throw the ball deep. But he's going to have those little dump-off passes to where Breece Hall is going to very much be involved in the offense.
And now, I mean, I'll slightly agree. I have some qualms about how much that usage is going to be from a reception standpoint.
Really? You don't think so?
I think there's going to be a lot of
doesn't dump the ball off a little bit. Really?
Yeah, well, obviously, too, because of the additions that they made to the offense. Well, I mean, you got Mike Williams coming in, which is, it's Mike Williams. We're expecting a little bit of a boost from Garrett Wilson, obviously, this year. That post-hype is back again. Last year, he was a first-round guy. Everybody was expecting a big year for Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers. Now we're back into that, those waters once again. And so I think that's where a lot of the target percentage is going to go through Garrett Wilson. But obviously my guy on the offense, my love for Malachi Corley, I'm not going to go any type of discussion through New York Jets without talking about Malachi Corley. I think he comes into that situation, that rotation there with the Jets as well. And they're going to utilize him in situations, via out of the backfield, dump offs, wide receiver screens. I mentioned it, 2 or 3 months ago. I feel like Malachi Corley is really kind of rounding in the form of being the Randall Cobb for for Aaron Rodgers that he had kind of in his prime. I feel like that's the player comparison that I'm using there for Malachi Corley. So all those pieces and all those variables, I think, is going to pull a little bit of that target percentage down that we saw with Breece Hall towards the end of last year.
So is Malachi Corley your 2024 Puka Nacua?
I'm leaning yes. I said I really.
I didn't know we were going to talk wide receivers, but here we go.
I've mentioned him, but from a draft capital perspective, it's obviously Corley's drafted a little bit higher in the drafts. There's a little bit more expectation with him coming in. This time last year, only a few of us were talking about Puka Nacua, where there's been quite the discussions. Even you see through mandatory mini camps, rookie OTAs. The action staff was talking up Malachi Corley left and right. So there's the buzz and the rumbling already there for a guy like him. So I'll probably save some of that discussion for the Puka Nacua, who's this year's Puka Nacua, when we discuss more wide receiver heavy type shows. So teaser, be on the lookout for that. But yeah, no, variables wise, I just think that's how I'm looking at. That's what I feel like. There's a little bit of a break there between Bijan and Breece Hall. Instead of them being neck and neck, I think there's a little bit of a separation there.
Yeah.
So I would take Bijan more kind of around that 4 or 5 spot in the first round, where I would probably target Breece Hall more kind of in that 9-10 range if he can make it further back into the first round. But a guy that, getting into another discussion point here, a guy that's on that edge of first round, second round eligibility, a lot of people are talking up right now, Jahmyr Gibbs, Detroit Lions.
Sure.
Everybody's really kind of hyping this guy up, pushing him up into the first round. Are you ready to jump on to Jahmyr Gibbs as a first round eligible running back this year?
No. I'm not saying he's not that. I think those wide receivers that you mentioned, like a Garrett Wilson, I think I would rather have him over a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I say that to say, if David Montgomery were not there, he would absolutely be a first rounder, if not maybe the number 2 overall. I mean, just losing out on those touchdowns at the goal line, you're going to get there. There's definitely some things that are missed, but that was my worry with Jahmyr Gibbs last year. I mean, he was going really, really, really high in about this kind of range.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my worry with David Montgomery, that they signed him a big deal. He's not going to come in and not do anything. But the one thing Jahmyr Gibbs proved last year was he's going to come in and he's going to catch the ball. He's going to be involved in the offense. He's going to get some yards. It took him a little bit to get going, but he definitely has a role in that offense as well. I just, at least in my first round draft capital, I don't see myself going on Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe that second pick in the second round, sure. But round 1, I'll probably let him slide.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat when it comes to that. I know Michael Florio, he's talked about it a lot on RotoBaller Radio on the weekends, and even with some of the work that he does with NFL fantasy as well. We're kind of in the same mindset. I feel like I want to take a wide receiver in the first round almost at any draft location spot that I'm at, because I feel more confident in these running backs that we're getting into here in the second round, that second tier of running backs. I feel there's a more confidence level in those players at running back in the second round as opposed to the wide receivers that we see that are floating around in the second round. So does that feel like that's kind of a more of a definite strategy is going into a draft and looking at it that way?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think you're having backs that I would personally go, in round 2, round 3, round 4 that, I think are really good running backs, and I feel like that's going to be the best roster build for me. So taking those wide receivers early, getting those running back. I mean, Derrick Henry's ADP's in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
How and why? Jonathan Taylor's ADP is in the 2nd round right now. Like, I start out wide receiver and then go those 2 guys in the 2nd and 3rd round. That's a great build. I mean, that's a round 1 running back last year that's going in round 2, round 3. Like, that's how you build your roster versus if you go running back round 1, let's just say, then you're looking at a Brandon Ayuk, Debo, Mike Evans, Pittman. Those guys are still good, but if I can get that running back value, that's absolutely where I want to go.
Absolutely. And that's that's that chunk at tier 2 that I have right now is, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, who I have ranked at, I'm five picks ahead of ECR consensus on Fantasy Pros right now. I've got Derrick Henry as my RB5 currently, Jahmyr Gibbs at 6, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, all rounding out my tier 2 at running back. Those are all guys we just mentioned, round 2 type of guys. Getting into round 3, you mentioned Derrick Henry's ADPs in round 3, and we're starting to see a little bit of that with Kyron Williams too. He's slid into the 3rd round where he was, 3 months ago, he was talked about as kind of an end of round 1, beginning of round 2 type talent. So we saw some course correction there, which is kind of to be expected. But those are the guys that I have there in tier 2. I'm more confident, like I said, those guys. A dream start for me, if you're in the back end of round one, is going Garrett Wilson, going AJ Brown, and then wrapping it around with a Jonathan Taylor in the second round. To me, that is a absolute monstrous start, and I would love to have that from that 8, 9, 10 spot in drafts. Whereas you just mentioned, you're talking about with Derrick Henry. If you go the opposite way on the other end, on the front half, you take a CeeDee Lamb, a Tyreek Hill, a Jamar Chase in those first 2, 3, 4 picks. You're coming back around. You can get a Derrick Henry at the tail end of the second round if you want to grab him. You can get a Kyron Williams back there on that tail end as well. I think both ends of first and second round, that's a dream start. Now, I would say you would agree with that as well.
100%. Like how would you, the wide receiver builds of late, I think by and large have worked well because there's been running backs that have come out of the woodwork, like Kyron Williams that have helped you. That was probably my best call last year. It definitely took a little while for that to be able to get going, and he was hurt for a little bit. So, I had some leagues where I did not make the playoffs with him just because he was out and hurt in some of those most important weeks out there. So I think that is definitely a dream start if you're on the front end, just like you said, reaching a little bit, according to ADP, reaching a little bit on Derrick Henry in round 2 if you're up toward the top. Or again, if you're in that back half, especially third round reversal, like getting that wide receiver round 1, a Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley in round 2, following best player available in round 3, like dream start.
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of tier 2, getting into the tier 3 guys, I think that's where you're starting to get into some guys that will have some red flags. There's some question marks there. For me, the guys that I have in this tier currently, I've got Isaiah Pacheco, Devin Achane, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, James Cook, Rashad White. Josh Jacobs absolutely is one of the kind of the biggest names that's been talked about over the last couple weeks now. There's so many differing opinions on Josh Jacobs, whether or not he's going to be a bell cow type of running back for the Green Bay Packers, or is he going to be a guy that's going to split and be more 50-50 like we see the Green Bay Packers run that offense, like we've seen Matt LaFleur run in the past with Aaron Jones and with A.J. Dillon. And going back to the Tennessee Titans, where, you've got him with Deion Lewis on the field, splitting time with Derrick Henry in his younger days. So Matt LaFleur, I think that's where I pumped the brakes a little bit with Josh Jacobs. They obviously, if you want to go contract speculation, he's paid the big money to come there. But what's your take on Josh Jacobs? Are you comfortable with him as your RB1?
I would be fairly comfortable if I had 2 good receivers starting off and Jacobs in round 3. I'd be fairly comfortable with him as my RB1. As they usually say, follow the money. Well, they paid him the money.
Yep.
Marshawn Lloyd is there though too. I mean, I don't see AJ. AJ Dillon's been hyped up by a lot of people over the years in the fantasy community that he's going to be like the next coming. Watch out for him. Like, I have never bought into that. Not that I think he's bad. I see him more as a goal line kind of a back, a plotter, which doesn't necessarily interest me anymore in fantasy. If you didn't have a PPR, maybe that's a thing you go for. But I think Josh Jacobs, for me, is one of those guys that I think he's going to get the lion's share of the carry. Lions, Packers.
Very tricky. They're very smart there. Everybody loves it.
I think he's going to get over 50% of the touches in that backfield.
Sure.
I think we're going to see some of these other guys mix in. Jacobs, I feel like he's going to get the goal line work. Like, I think they are going to start phasing A.J. Dillon out. I think you're going to see Marshawn Lloyd get some action.
Yeah.
But Jacobs is definitely a guy that if I could get him, I would love him as my 2, but if he was my 1 and I backed him up pretty quick with another running back, I still think that's a good start.
Let's go over under here. Or I'll say, what would be your betting unit on Josh Jacobs scoring his first ever receiving touchdown of his NFL career this year with the Green Bay Packers. He has yet to score a receiving touchdown in his NFL career, which is an odd statement to say.
I say he catches one. One exactly.
One exactly. We're going to give it the over under 0.5.
You make me cough.
What if we get 1.5 on the over under? We're down. We're under that.
I'll say over.
But I think this is the lucky year. I believe he finds the end zone via a reception touchdown as well. So I agree with you there. I do think Marshawn Lloyd's going to factor in a lot more than what people realize currently. I think we're going to see, it's going to be a slow start. Obviously, rookies coming into the NFL, there's a little bit of a lead-in acclimation factor when it comes to the rookies coming in. So I think it's going to be a build-up process for Marshawn Lloyd. So it's going to be more of that kind of that 65-35 type of a share, I think, early on in the season with Jacobs getting most of the work. But I think that's going to be a situation where, barring injury and Jacobs gets hurt, I think that's a situation where you see Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd more in that kind of 50-50 range when it comes to, title time down in fantasy playoffs. That's how I view that backfield currently. That's why I've got Jacobs at 12. I mean, I've got right behind him, I've got Joe Mixon, James Cook. I wouldn't have any qualms whatsoever about moving one or both of those guys ahead of Josh Jacobs in my rankings currently. So, but outside of that, getting down to the last guy in this tier that I have ranked currently, Rachaad White, loses Dave Canales over to Carolina. We saw the heavy workload last year with Rachaad White and with Canales really kind of feeding Rachaad White. How do you feel about Rachaad White in 2024? Will that move of coach Canales to Carolina affect what we see with Rachaad White as far as being kind of that main focal point of the Buccaneers backfield there?
I don't think so. I think he's still going to be the focal point of that offense there. He's still a security blanket for Baker back there. So year two of Baker Mayfield in Tampa. I don't see really anybody coming in and for me anyway, taking any touches away from Rachaad White. So he's still right up there toward the top of that, late RB1, early RB2 type of range.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I feel good about him, obviously, as a running back too. But I have a feeling that some people are going to have that, box score mentality and look at a lot of the numbers that he put up last year and not really project forward. And you're probably going to have some situations like home leagues and things like that, where a guy like a Rachaad White's going to get drafted earlier than what you expect in most of those. But getting outside of that tier, getting into the next group of guys, currently I have on this next tier a big bulk of guys that I really feel could kind of filter in and out. But it starts off RB16. I've got Kenneth Walker, followed by Zamir White, Ramondre Stevenson, David Montgomery that we talked about previously, James Conner, Najee Harris, the rookie Jonathan Brooks, who is now in that David Canales offensive mindset. And then RB23, I have it Alvin Kamara right now. And looking at how these, I have these shaking out compared to the rest of the industry currently in ECR. Above market with James Conner, I'm 4 picks ahead of ECR there. 6 picks ahead in ECR with Jonathan Brooks at 22. But I'm behind the market in 6 picks on Alvin Kamara. Disagreements, anything like that there with this group of running backs?
I'm so 50-50 on Kamara.
Yeah.
The type of year he had last year was great. He's at that running back age where he should start falling off a cliff, which, you always want to be a year early than a year late on a guy like that. Granted, his ADP where he is kind of giving you a little bit more of a buying opportunity, especially if he's your RB2 there.
Yep.
So, again, I think it's one of those things where I think you got him properly ranked. I may rank him a little bit ahead, especially in PPR leagues, of a guy like a James Conner, David Montgomery, Zamir White that you're mentioning. I may go ahead of him for me with those guys, but we've got a big cluster of guys there, a big tier of guys there for a reason.
So how do you feel? How do you feel about a guy like Zamir White? There's been talk over the last few days. Some people want to point to him as being this year's Alexander Madison, who coincidentally enough is his backup now with the Raiders in Las Vegas. How do you feel about him? We saw that big workload down the stretch last year as the Raiders committed to the run. There's really been no changes to that offense coming into this season. So who's to say that does not continue with Zamir White this year? Big workload in the run game.
I think he's all in line for a big workload. I mean, I don't think Madison is going to come in and cut in like some people may predict. If he could just be getting some more receptions in there, we'd probably be talking very early RB2 territory here for a guy like Zamir White. So definitely think he's somebody to be able to keep your eye on out there. The one guy I'm going to have to get off Zamir White, but the one guy who we haven't talked to that I haven't heard a lot of anybody talking about, ADP and Fishbowl is a little bit later there, and that's Kenneth Walker. Haven't heard a whole lot about Kenneth Walker. He's coming off of being hurt this last year. He is somebody that I feel like is going to have a season where he's going to break out. He is, if I could get him as my RB2, have maybe a good handcuff as an RB3 back there, especially if I'm building those wide receiver, heavy teams early. He's a guy that I think can finish as an RB1 very easily in that offense this year.
No, I will definitely agree with you there. I mean, you look at some of the advanced metrics on a guy like Kenneth Walker, yards per reception last year, 8.9. That was RB4 at the position. Total touchdowns, you've got 9, and that was RB12 on the season. And I was playing just the 54% snap share, which was RB24. A lot of extra usage with Zach Charbonnet last year. Now you have the new offense coming in, Ryan Grubb's offense from Washington coming in. A lot of people, and I think this is where your buying opportunity can be with a guy like Kenneth Walker's, because so much of the talk out there in the fantasy industry and a lot of the other analysts that you see online, they want to point to Ryan Grubb's offense and how the Seahawks are going to 3 wide receiver, spread the ball out. They're going to pick it up as far as passing totals this year. They're going to throw the ball a little bit more. But really, when you kind of dig into the dirt a little bit and you kind of read between the tea leaves, Ryan Grubb's mentioning, behind the scenes in certain situations that they want to run the ball. They do. They want to get out there and run the ball.
Have to run the ball.
And that's going to bode well for Kenneth Walker. I think if they do run a little bit more spread with 3 wide receivers, move DK Metcalf around the formation and what they've talked about as well, it's going to only free up running lanes for a guy like Kenneth Walker, who obviously, we've seen it before the last couple of years. He wants to hit the home run, dances behind the line a little bit. You see that from time to time because he wants to get that seam and take off and go. I think this offense really kind of leans more into what he can do from a skill set standpoint. So I'm right there with you. I like Kenneth Walker, a fantastic pick for an RB2. And if you want to go really, really kind of zero running back and wait a few rounds, you build your roster deep at wide receiver, tight end, go that route. He's not really going to be a terrible guy that you could get later on as an RB1 potentially. I think that production's going to be there this year, albeit if he stays on the field. You mentioned it. That's kind of his thing, the injuries. If he can stay on the field, he's definitely a guy that I think can really help from a production standpoint, week in and week out for a lot of fantasy managers out there. So I will agree with you on that one there.
Let me ask you this, because I know last year how high you were on him.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued to see where you have Nick Chubb ranked and your thoughts on Nick Chubb heading in, coming off that ACL from this last year.
Absolute not touching the guy this year.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm currently ranked RB 44.
44.
44. I'm 5 spots behind the market in ECR right now. So, the market's got him at RB 39 currently, and I'm even further behind that. I just don't. I don't feel good about it. There's talk that there's the timetable. We don't even know the timetable for him to return currently. So you have to start at that point. And we saw it before, back years and years ago when, he got injured at Knoxville for the Georgia Bulldogs in a game against the Vols where he blew out.
Walked into the stadium.
Yeah, just blew out that knee in that game against the Vols that day. Obviously affected his draft stock, and he really didn't become the Nick Chubb that we now know him being. It took him 2 to 3 years as he got into the league to kind of rehab from that injury and that situation to me scares me off completely. That was a horrible, horrible injury last year. So I'm a guy that's going to take the advantage and go with Jerome Ford, and I'm going to buy in at Jerome Ford with his current value in drafts. That's kind of a guy that I would target because I'm not on Nick Chubb this year with the injury situation. Kind of similar, if you want to dive deeper down into the ranks, it's not a guy that I was expecting to talk about too much, but a J.K. Dobbins. He blows his Achilles last year. Now he's back with Greg Roman over with the Chargers in Los Angeles on a 1-year deal with no guarantees. That's the key thing with him. So he has this entire summer training camp to kind of really show some things. And if he's not up to speed, not really up to what they want from a health standpoint, Dobbins is a guy that could be a cap cut, during training camp if he's not healthy and ready to go. So similar situations between those two, and both players at running back that I'm not interested in. Those are 2 guys that I would let other managers in my leagues, take the risk on. Now, I'm fine with letting that go by in drafts.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say the name of the guy who I feel like Kamani Vidal, whether JK is there or not, is going to be getting some action this year.
Yes. That is my other guy. If we want to talk about a guy that could be a Puka Nacua at the running back position.
Am I getting down into your sleepers too quick here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, he is a sleeper for me this year. I've been talking him up for basically since January. Talked to him. I was able to actually interview him at the scouting combine, talk to him there, watched him work out. It was amazing. He's done nothing but increase his draft stock throughout the process. Now lands in a favorable situation with the Chargers. I think, he's, like I mentioned, I think if there's a chance you want to get a guy that's could be a Puka Nacua at the running back position this year, Kamani Vidal is the name that you want to kind of have on your draft queue when you get into drafts here in the next month or so. So, yeah, you got into my potential sleeper there. But outside of that, I mean, for you, do you have any interest in a Nick Chubb? Do you have any interest in a J.K. Dobbins currently where they're valued?
JK probably not. I think there's just too many mouths there that, again, I like Vidal. I think Gus Edwards is going to get something there. Yep. So for me, not as much on J.K. Dobbins. Nick Chubb, to me, if he comes in and is the Nick Chubb of old, I don't know if he is. Jerome Ford is there. I don't think that he is. How do I want to say it? Jerome Ford's good, but he's no Nick Chubb. But Nick Chubb, if he's going to be hurt, that's definitely something that I want to do. I think the stock, and granted, I think Nick Chubb is going to be one of the more volatile guys when we start seeing camp open up, seeing what he's looking like. Is he getting time? Mm-hmm. Is he going to be back? When is he going to be back? His draft stock is really going to be dependent on what he's doing here.
Sure. Yeah. And so going into and just touching on Jerome Ford, kind of deeper analytics here, looking at it. Benefit for him, obviously, is playing with the Cleveland Browns. They were number 4 in team run plays per game last year at 30.2. So he's going to get a chance to really kind of cut into plenty of opportunities there. Targets 14th at the position with 63 last year. Rushing yards 22, even with limited opportunities that he had in certain weeks, based on how they were kind of splitting out opportunities. Because snap share, he played 53.7, which is only RB 26 last year. But weighted opportunities, he was RB 14 at the position, which is he had 13 points per game basically. So they're going to use him if Nick Chubb's not the Nick Chubb like you mentioned. So
yeah.
I think there's definitely an opportunity to get him where he's valued in drafts right now and feel good about it as like an RB3 and RB4. And that kind of an area just depends on how you're building your roster out. So wanted to touch on the the guys that I have at tier 5 here, I believe. Tier 4. Guys that I'm going to have that are finishing out essentially the RB2s. And I've got starting at RB24 is Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson at 25, Tony Pollard, Raheem Mostert, who was last year's big winner in fantasy football, and then rounded out at RB28 in this tier with DeAndre Swift. Outside of that, we'll kind of get into some of the deeper guys here in just a second. But out of that tier there, of that grouping of guys, got well ahead of the market on Brian Robinson. I've got him at RB25. I'm 8 picks ahead of VCR on him. Behind the markets with Aaron Jones right now, -5 on him. And then also behind the market and DeAndre Swift at RB26. I'm 6 picks below market with DeAndre Swift right now. How do you feel about that group, that tier of guys there? Jones, Robinson, Pollard, Mostert, Swift. Any excitement with these players there?
Not a ton of excitement, I would say. DeAndre Swift is being a little bit of a Bears homer there. They've obviously signed him to a nice big deal, so I think he's going to get a little bit of work there. Aaron Jones, I don't know that I'm necessarily as excited about. With a guy like him. Mostert, it's hard to get excited about even after last year with the kind of year that he had. It's just one of those things that if Devin Achane is healthy, he is probably not going to get as much work, but they did a really good job mixing him in last year as well. Jalen Wright. I was trying to say Jalen Warren again. Jalen Wright is there as well. I think potentially cutting in, so he's not a guy as much as I was on him in the past. Tony Pollard, I think I like Tajay Spears a little bit more than I like Pollard as well. So this is a group by and large I'm probably going to be avoiding minus DeAndre Swift. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on Mostert there. I think last year was a big outlier year for him. Played a 57.3 snap share, which is RB19 at the position. Was only the RB10 in rushing yards with 1,012. Targets, 32 on the year, which was RB42. So he really wasn't utilized much in the passing game. But really what it kind of boils down to with Mostert last year was he was so touchdown dependent. 21 on the year, number 1 at the position. Now you're talking about a guy that's 32. Yeah, so he's over that cliff that we always talk about with running backs and how they start to decline. Mostert's a guy that's really testing father time, if you want to talk about it. He's never played really a full slate of games in back-to-back years, so that's something to keep in mind. And that's just, for me, there's so many caution flags around him, Raheem Mostert. And then really when you want to listen to the team talk about how excited they are about kind of getting Devin Achane more involved in the offense this year. So that's something to keep in mind there as well, I think. So right now, from an ADP standpoint, from a ranking standpoint, Mostert's kind of in that range where he needs to be as far as ranking-wise. But you touched on him, and he's actually the next guy that I have ranked at RB29 is Jalen Warren. How are you feeling about that backfield situation at Pittsburgh this year between Harris and Warren? Now everybody's most hated offensive coordinator / head coach and Arthur Smith going to Pittsburgh. What's your feelings on that offense, that backfield now? How's that shaking out? 50-50, 60-40? Where are you seeing this?
I'm feeling a little more 50-50 still. I think we're going to see a little bit of a repeat from last year. A guy like Najee being very consistent, not flashy, to a guy like Warren, doing one of those numbers there. So I think it's hard to really assess that backfield. It's one of those old school situations like we used to have with D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart in Carolina. Like, damn, if one of these guys could just get hurt, the other one would be a top 5 to 10 guy, but they keep being there. It's starting to feel like that situation here. I think some of the work too is also going to be very dependent on who the quarterback is. If Russell Wilson is going to be the guy, there's that case to be made. I think a little bit more maybe for Najee Harris, which is why I think his ADP is a little bit higher right now. Sorry. I think if Fields becomes a quarterback, I think Warren goes up a little bit higher there as well. So I think that's kind of where I lean, but I think just because of ADP, I think with the guys being so close, I would rather have Warren, all things considered. So but I think we're going to have kind of a 50-50 action going on here with these guys.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made depending on how you want to build your narrative on each player. Najee Harris, essentially a contract year, got a chip on his shoulder. He's going to have to prove it to get a contract, whether it be with the Steelers next year or with another team next year. So there's that additive incentive for him to produce this year, which from a coordinator standpoint, Arthur Smith is, the guy that was really put that workload on Derrick Henry with his time there towards the tail end with the Titans, and was really kind of run-centric with one running back, and that was Derrick Henry. Now, much could be said that obviously that's Derrick Henry. You want to give the ball to him. Najee Harris is not Derrick Henry, although they came from the same school. But so there's kind of the pros you could use and build a narrative with Najee Harris and how he's ranked ahead. But then you have on the other side of the coin with a Jaylen Warren. He's a more explosive guy, more utilized in the passing game. But then also, too, from a goal line perspective, last year, I believe the Steelers gave 42 or 45 goal line opportunities to Najee Harris to only 12 for Jaylen Warren. Now, if you want to use that narrative with Arthur Smith from the Falcons last year, he only gave Bijan Robinson 44% of the goal line opportunities last year. He spread that out between Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and then everybody's favorite Cordero Patterson that likes to come in and sneak in and steal opportunities. That's your narrative you could build for Jaylen Warren. Sure. If he gets more goal line opportunities added in with that reception usage that we're expecting out of the backfield, pushes him ahead of a Najee Harris.
Sure. I think that could be too a little bit Bijan last year and Arthur Smith not necessarily wanting to give a rookie that much, year one. So could that be it? I hope that's it, because otherwise he's freaking blind. Bijan is just a talent. So
yes.
I can absolutely see that. And that's, like I said, I think just because they're so close, I think, again, the ability of Jaylen Warren to be taken a little bit later and have equal production, I think, is why I would probably lean going him a little bit more in drafts right now.
Absolutely. We'll give you that. Kind of a similar situation. I just want to get a quick take from you on that backfield situation, kind of going back to James Conner. You've got Trey Benson coming into the fold, rookie running back. How do you feel that backfield's going to shake out? Because James Conner, obviously, the Cardinals like him. They want to utilize him. He's on the last year of his deal. So the case could be made that they're going to just use him till the wheels fall off this year and then escort in the rookie next year. How do you feel about that? Where's your opportunity there? You giving a little bit more credence to a split backfield, or you feel like that's a little bit heavier workload for Conner?
Yeah, I mean, I think Conner's going to be the guy a little bit more year one. Of Trey Benson kind of being there too. I think he's one of the more appreciated guys in drafts right now. Again, I think he's a little bit too like Derrick Henry, where he's a guy, he's going to produce, like if he's on the field and healthy. Unfortunately for him, he has not been very healthy the last couple of years. So you've seen these running backs come in. They traded for Michael Carter last year. Amari DiMercato was a fantasy darling early in the season with James Conner out. So I think there's a case to be made, for the rookie, for Trey Benson coming in there and at the very least getting some work. And maybe even as the season goes on, kind of seeding some of the carries and some of the workloads. Again, I don't think James Conner's making it through the entire season unscathed here. So do I like James Conner? Yeah, he's not bad, but if I had him, I would. I don't handcuff backs as often as I probably should, but he is a guy I would 100% be handcuffing with Trey Benson.
Yeah. You mentioned him staying on the field. He played 13 games in back-to-back years, so that's obviously been, his albatross, so to speak, is being healthy and staying on the field for James Conner. So obviously a situation. You mentioned it. If you can handcuff Trey Benson later on in the draft, that sets you up for possible success later on in the year if something were to happen to Conner, especially come fantasy playoff time. So, getting into, and kind of wanted to wrap up the show and finish by talking about our woos and our boos at the running back position for 2024. Let's say, give me two woos for you, a guy that's probably higher up the board that you are very in on for 2024, and then possibly a guy farther down the board that you're in on as your woo for this season.
Okay. So a woo for this year that we really have not talked about so far. I don't even think I have heard you mention his name, is Isaiah Pacheco. I think he is just in that perfect position. He's been in the league a couple of years. He's a hard runner.
Yeah.
I think he's at that point where he isn't necessarily going maybe as high as he should be going, to where I think he's been getting some major value and a major push. I have a feeling with the second name, I'm going to shock you a little bit. It's ADP wise. I've been in on this guy for a couple of years. He'll flash, but I think it's just because of where his ADP is that I feel like he's going to be on a lot of my teams as an RB3 this year, and that's Devin Singletary. They have nobody else in that running back room whatsoever. And if you watch the Hard Knocks show, you'll see how much they like Devin Singletary. And in that offense, you're going to have a lot of receivers out there as well. You're going to have a lot of DBs out there. I feel like Devin Singletary is going to do a little bit of running out there. Again, I don't think he's going to be an RB1, but I think he's going to be maybe a mid RB2 out there, maybe a good spot. So,
yeah. Brian Daboll definitely loves himself Motor, as he likes to call him. But no, those are two great names. I agree with you with Pacheco. Very unheralded, undervalued guy. Opportunities galore in that offense. And I think that you see the return of that high-powered Kansas City offense this year. So I think there's going to be plenty of scoring opportunity. That's why I've got him as an inside, he's inside my top 10 currently with my rankings. And for that reason alone, opportunities are going to be there. Usage is going to be there. Touchdown potential easily there. But for me, gonna go, let's say for me, top guy, I'm gonna go Derrick Henry. I've been a big proponent of him. He's my guy that I'm targeting up the board, very heavy on him. Love Derrick Henry and that potential this year. And further down the board, I'm going to go, and it's a guy that's starting to gain some steam, been talked about quite a bit over the last month, and that's Jaleel McLaughlin. I like him in that Denver Broncos offense to be a guy that's going to catch a lot of passes, get moved, or get a lot more extra opportunities this year in 2024 with Sean Payton. Definitely like him as a guy that you can get as an RB5 that's going to potentially bring you in certain situations RB3 potential. Could be RB2 potential in certain weeks with the right matchup too. Nah, that's how I'm feeling with those two there. But outside of that, give me a boo, a guy that you're completely fading here in 2024 that you're not going to touch at all. Not touching with mine like we talked.
Yeah, I mean, just where's our was ADP there? I'm probably not going to be touching Devin Achane. Just going a little bit too high for me and where I feel comfortable, especially with his injury history as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning there with you in that situation. I talked about Josh Jacobs earlier. He's kind of a guy that I'm off on, but if I'm going to look at another name that I don't really have high hopes for this year that I want to get involved with, and that's Rachaad White. I mentioned that one earlier too. I think there's going to be a little bit of a regression from a usage standpoint this year. Scoring opportunities probably not going to be there as much. So that's definitely a guy that I'm fading here in 2024. I'm probably not going to have much Rachaad White. So that's going to wrap it up. We're finishing up here on the show. Obviously, we mentioned at the top of the show, Scott Fish Bowl this weekend. We're going to be live in Nashville. So be on the lookout for us there with that live stream from Nashville starting at 2 p.m. Central Time on Saturday. So, of course, I'll have all that information I'll put out there for that there as well. Go donate to Fantasy Cares. That'll help out Scott Fish and all the great guys that put on this event for us. But outside of that, any other parting tidbits you want to throw out to everybody there?
And just ready to see y'all Saturday at 2, so we're looking forward to it.
Good deal. As always, I am the Roto Superstar. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the podcast here at woo_fantasy. And Nick there is also at the real FF Goat that you can see there. And then till next time, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you on Saturday for a special edition of Woo Fantasy here on rotoballer.com.